Hi there, and welcome to my video lesson on what is the base of support zone, also known as postural equilibrium. So in this video, I want to explore the line of gravity, what this is, and how it impacts our posture as human beings when we stand upright. So the line of gravity is also known as the center of mass. It is an invisible line that basically bisects the body and is the sum of all the individual body parts and the effect of gravity upon those body parts. And this has enormous implications for our ability to stand and to move in the world. And I want to explore that in this video lesson. So when we move through the world as human beings, our base of support travels with us. This is something we can never escape. Gravity is always present, and it always affects on our bodies in different ways. One of the things that we desire as humans is stability, especially when it comes to movement. Without stability, we can't move, and without low cost consumption of stability, we have very difficult times moving without expending great effort. So naturally, human beings are inclined to be efficient as much as possible, and this is accomplished when our posture is also very healthy and stable. So for instance, we naturally assume a gait pattern or a stance pattern that allows us to maximize this base of support. Healthy people typically have bases of support that can support them, and this is usually accomplished with shoulder width stance. Sometimes, depending on situational type of effects, whether it's environmental and or problems with musculoskeletal or proprioceptive or neurological, this stance may need to increase. Also, our bodies are composed in a way that when we stand upright and we suffer from no ailments and we have no injury, the force of gravity, along with the composition of our bodies, actually very much can allow us to stand and move without any muscular activity in our body. So I drew this here to show that one of the very interesting ways in which we carry ourselves and we carry this stability with us is the balance of forces in our vertebral column, from our head to our vertebral column, all the way down to our feet. So think of it like the puzzle game Jenga. If you're familiar, it's a game with small rectangular blocks that you stack, and you can create a tower. Well, when it's perfectly balanced and all the components are in place properly without any type of displacement, it stands perfectly upright by itself, and it requires absolutely no assistance to stand upright. Same thing with most structures. So unless acted upon by an outside force, or if there's some structural flaw, usually most structures that are built will more or less kind of support themselves, and the body takes a page out of that, or those elements would take a page out of the body and kind of copy that theory or notion about how things actually work. So gravity and the vertebral column mitigate any involvement of muscles, and that's the way the body prefers to be. Now, if we look at a situation where there's an injury, for instance, where maybe someone broke their leg or they suffered some type of tear in their knee with their cartilage and they can't support themselves properly, I like to think of crutches as basically like base of support rentals. You go to a doctor and they tell you you can't put your weight on both legs. So by default, your base of support is compromised. You can't move around the world efficiently hopping on one leg. It's really difficult. If you don't want to use a wheelchair, that also makes getting around quite difficult. So another option, which is more practical, is using crutches, which is basically a substitute for the base of support that you've lost. And it's more difficult to move on crutches also because you are going to be involving some muscular use. So standing on one leg effectively in this situation, it shifts a lot of the burden to this healthy limb to use more muscular force to keep this base of support optimized. But the optimization is lost a bit because this base of support tends to have gradations towards the periphery because of the use of muscles. in your body. So it's not that there are no contributions from the limb that is hurt, but it's just that the burden tends to shift towards the periphery. And I've shown this here. The line of gravity shift towards the periphery leads to an increase in muscular activity. So if we were to look at this from the perspective of looking down at your feet, for instance, so here you would basically have no foot on the ground if you were on crutches, but the foot that's here, and I probably should have just drawn a foot here to show this, that foot there would be receiving a tremendous amount of work because the forces that you need to utilize to stay upright to create this base of support zone are essentially what is more or less known as, anything outside of this zone is known as the zone of correction. And I did make a slide for this, but unfortunately I didn't copy it over in time. But so anything that falls outside of this zone is called the zone of correction. That can most be easily explained by looking at this example I drew here with this woman here. We'll call her Susie Balance. So Susie Balance is riding the subway, and let's say all of a sudden the subway comes to a screeching halt. If she is not holding on to one of these support nodes, which basically everything inside of a subway train is multiple bases of support built in, whether it's seats, whether it's hand grips, or support poles. If she's standing there and she's not holding on when that train starts to accelerate, the outside force of the train moving on her body throws her center of gravity off outside of the support zone. When it gets thrown off outside the support zone here, she has to have a correction. And the correction usually is to grab something or someone nearby, and hopefully in this situation, there's no space for her to not have to be grabbed or grab somebody else, that there is something nearby for her to grasp onto so she doesn't fall. So the idea here is that all around us we have a base of support assistance. So the takeaway here is that the base of support prefers to be a very efficient, stable area. It moves when there is an injury to the body. Or I should say, it shouldn't move. It doesn't move. The size of the zone may shift. The intensity or the use of human musculature increases depending upon what's happening in that base of support. But also outside forces can really play a major role in producing a destabilizing effect. And my takeaway from all this is that if you're healthy, your base of support functions perfectly. If you're unhealthy, it doesn't. If there's an outside force like a shove, or if you get hit by something, if you slide on ice and your base of support completely evaporates and just you lose it completely, there's nothing you can do. You're going to fall. You're going to reach out for something to help you to assist that center of pressure, that center of mass, that line of gravity. So I hope you found this somewhat helpful and some takeaways with my illustrations. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment box below. Thank you.